All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. Today, my guest is Melissa Guida-Richards, here to talk about her new book, What White Parents Should Know About Transracial Adoption, an adoptee's perspective on its history, nuances, and practices. For those of you that are new here, my name is Chantal. I'm the Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. Thank you for joining in and watching live. Maybe you're watching this later on replay. Thank you for taking time to be with us. As always, feel free to ask questions. We can take your questions live, add your comments in the chat. Just want to remind you that we are live streaming on our public Facebook page. So anything that you're sharing in the comments is something that's going to be available publicly. So you do want to be mindful and not include any identifiable information about your children, so names or health information when including your comments or questions. So just keep that in mind. We do love to hear from you, and we hope that you find today's discussion informative and engaging. So I'll just introduce Melissa. She's an author, an adoptee, and advocate based in Pennsylvania. She was adopted in 1993 from Colombia to a family in the United States. She's been featured in news outlets like Good Day LA, NBC LX, BBC Radio 4, Do the Work, as well as work in the New York Times, Insider, The Independent, and HuffPost. She also does workshops with adoption agencies like Heritage Camps and CASE. Melissa is also the founder of Adoptee Thoughts, which is an Instagram account and also a podcast, which she created to help elevate adoptee voices and educate adoptive parents on the nuances and complexity of adoption. So a big welcome and happy International Women's Day, Melissa. So happy you could join me today.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. So we have a ton of questions. So if you're okay, we're just gonna dive right in.
Yes, let's go for it.
Awesome. Okay, so the book, let's just start there. Maybe you could just, fill us in how this book came to be, and was there some kind of specific catalyst that brought hey, I need to write a book about this? How did that work for you?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I'm also a late discovery adoptee. So that means I didn't find out until I was 19. And so as you can imagine, it was a big shock. And my family and I, we had many deep conversations about adoption that we didn't really know how to navigate. And it was after one of these conversations where my parents, we would sit at the breakfast table and we would share all of our perspectives and why they decided to adopt. And then I would explain why such and such was bothering me. And we would always seem to come at odds with one another because we were very passionate about our perspectives. And it took a lot for us to kind of sit there and really realize what the other had gone through and how to kind of approach it in a more gentle way. And so it was after one of these conversations, I was talking to my mom and she was like, well, Melissa, I didn't have a guidebook or anything. Back then, the adoption agency kind of just gave us a baby. And then after that, they didn't even check up with us afterwards. And so that kind of sparked the idea. And I was like, but what if there was a book? And so I dug into the web and I searched high and low. And then I found out that most materials that are written for adoptive parents are written by either adoption professionals or by other adoptive parents. And traditionally, there wasn't anything published by an adoptee. And I kind of sat with that idea, and then it just kept nagging at me. And so I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And I was picked up by a publisher and here we are.
Wow. I mean, if there's a catalyst, that would be it. I mean, I think over the last, since I've been at Adopt for Life, there's been many conversations and even for families that are quite open, from the beginning, I still find navigating those conversations sometimes challenging. So from the perspective of a late discovery, I mean, that must have made it even a little bit more challenging. How do we even start this conversation?
Yeah.
Okay, so without giving away too much, but maybe you could give our audience a bit of a glimpse of what the book is about, or like what someone's going to learn from this book and why that would benefit them.
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about nurturing identity, unlearning white saviorism, and kind of fixing the mistakes that you don't even know you're making. And I try to use a little bit of my personal experience as well as a ton of peer-reviewed research that I looked up while figuring out the history of adoption. And I kind of wanted to start at the very beginning, like how adoption came about, how did transracial and international adoption came about. So I used a lot of facts and then also pulled from my experience and the experiences of other adoptees and adoptive parents. There's a whole section in there where I interviewed adoptive parents and adoptees. And then at the end, I have a whole list of resources, from essays, from books, to Facebook groups that I suggest that adoptive parents and adoptive adoptees to check out as well.
Okay, so it's very comprehensive.
Yeah.
So obviously from the title, the main audience is white adoptive parents. But is there anyone else like that you feel that should be picking up this book and taking a look at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really for anyone who's looking to learn more about adoption. And I've had many adoptees read the book and found that they have connected with a lot of my experience and just been able to learn for the first time a kind of neutral history where they didn't know about adoption, transracial adoption, the adoption industry in the United States, and then international adoption as well. And so I feel like anyone who has the community with adoption, relatives, not just adoptive parents, but anyone can really gain a lot from it.
Yeah. So anybody touched by adoption could benefit. Awesome. So if you're joining us now, we're live with Melissa Guida-Richards, author of What White Parents Should Know About Transracial Adoption. We can take your questions live. Happy to chat with you out there. So what is, in your opinion, the significance of having adoptees share their perspectives and experiences? I mean, not everybody can write a book, but I mean, I think there's opportunity for people to search out those perspectives. And so what benefit would that have, for those in the community?
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous benefit for everyone to listen to adoptees, because from day one, we're part of this community and we experience it at such a different angle than adoptive parents or the adoption professionals. And we have experience with missing birth family, with wanting to search, not wanting to search, and we all have amazing, unique stories that aren't all the same. And what I tell adoptive parents a lot is that in the media, you will hear a certain type of angle. And there's a reason for that. People want to think of the happily ever after adoption story. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. The only problem I see with that is that we're not really getting the full picture. And in order to really look at adoption, we need to look at the beauty and the flaws, so we can continue improving this industry together. And to do that, I really think that we need to raise adoptee voices, whether the domestic adoptees, international adoptees, transracial adoptees, because we all have valuable stories that adoptive parents and adoption professionals and other adoptees can learn so much from.
Well, very well said. Thank you. So what advice would you have? I mean, beyond listening to the voices, any other advice that you could share to adoptive kin or even customary care families who are on their parenting journey?
Yeah, to put it simply, I believe that adoptive parents and kin, we need to be ready to do the work, because it may seem like we need to check off the list for like home studies and initial education or hair care. And then once we do that, that's it, we're good. But the thing is, everything is ongoing, and we're going to have to continue learning together with our adopted child as you go on, because your child will grow up, they'll have different opinions, and you need to learn how to approach those situations. If you're adopting transracially, you need to learn about racism and microaggressions and how to prepare your child to go into the world where they're not going to be protected under that umbrella of privilege if you're a white adoptive family. And so getting ready to do the work means buckling down and being ready to incorporate culture every day and not just a one-off situation.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. So there's a section in the book that deals with terminology and word choices. Can you tell us why that was important for you to include in the book?
Yeah, in many of my adoptee groups and community groups with adoptive parents, it tends to be like a hot button issue. So whether we're saying birth mother or natural mother, or from just like initials of like, don't use BM because that makes it seem like a different word that isn't very appealing, and just stuff like that. I found it to be a very nuanced conversation where people were very passionate, and they were either pro positive language or pro like realistic language. So for example, people, an adoptee would prefer saying like, oh, that's my first mother, that's my real mother. And then an adoptive parent will say like, oh, well, I don't think real mother is appropriate. And like, some adoptees don't like that. And I learned that it's very personal. And there's so many different options out there that we can't say one is better than the other, because one adoptee may have a different opinion. So I wanted to encourage adoptive families and adoptees to really look at the language that we're using and communicate with one another, instead of just making assumptions and just saying like everything is right is this way, instead of learning from one another.
Yeah, and I think like specifically around that language of family, I mean, as an adoptee, even the words that I chose changed over time, depending on my age and my relationship and just how I felt about it. So, when I was younger, I referred to it as like my biological parents, because it was just easy to be like removed from it, and then as I got older and learned more, it changed. So I think we have to be open to changing too, like, and being open to allowing people to use language that they're comfortable with. And again, going back to listening to why the adoptee wants to use that type of language.
Mm-hmm.
So this segues really well into my next question. So back in November, in Canada, it's Adoption Awareness Month. So we held a panel on specifically that, called Language Matters. And we kind of chose about 4 words and had a panel discussion from different perspectives about these words and the power of words. So we also believe that to be open to learning, we need to listen, as we've been talking about since our discussion with Melissa about specifically listening to adoptee voices. So, I mean, we talked about specifically the language around families and birth parents and first families. Are there any other words that came out, like when you were putting this book together, that adoptive parents or families are in that constellation should be mindful of or aware of?
Yeah, I mean, you even said it, just the constellation. I am a 90s baby, so like we kind of grew up talking about like the adoption triad, so the adoptive parents, the adoption agencies, and the adoptee. And while like I'm fine with that term, just writing the book, I learned that other adoptees and adoptive parents, they weren't comfortable with that because it excluded foster kinship and all these other things. And for me, I was fine with it because adoptees, that was like kind of like a general like term for me, but I understand why other people feel that way. And so that was one of the terms that I included in the book. And I kind of focused on like positive adoption language versus realistic versus the intricacies where we may approach certain words in a more passionate way, and why we just need to kind of take a step back and kind of defer to the community that we're in and respect the boundaries that everyone has put up. And so I think it's very important for adoptive families when they're talking to their child to make sure that they're communicating what they're comfortable with, what their adoptee is comfortable with, and maybe realizing that we need to take a step back and defer to your adopted child, or defer to the adoption community that is run by adoptees, and or the birth mothers that are pleading to not use certain words. And it's a case-by-case situation that I just wanted people to start thinking about, because I can't tell you what's right and wrong for your family. You kind of have to figure that out on your own.
Absolutely. I mean, every family is unique, every journey is unique. And I think, and language evolves, and it ebbs and flows. And we just have to, be open to the conversation and listen, right?
Yeah.
So I was just checking, and we do have a couple of questions live. So I'm just gonna, okay, somebody's just joined late. So the name of the book is What White Parents Should Know About Transracial Adoption. Perfect. I'm gonna post a link in the chat too, so you'll know exactly where to go to get the book. And then I do have another situational question. Are you okay if we ask this live? Yeah. So somebody's asking about their child, but biracial daughter, and they adopted her at birth. So they've had conversations with her about, so she's aware that she's adopted, so it's not, hidden from her. So talking to her about having two mommies, two daddies, biological, that are not involved at this point. Are there any other points that you think would help her at this age, or as she starts school?
How old is she?
3. I think it says 3 years old.
Yeah, 3 is a very pivotal age, because children are just like sucking up information. It's like little sponges. So I think it's a very good time just to begin reading stories about adoption, just beginning that vocabulary. So as she gets older, she can be more comfortable asking questions about her adoption story, about race, or just differences. It's a great age to start talking about, different colors, different cultures, and just bringing that awareness, so she knows that mom and dad are a safe place, or mom and mom, wherever the parents are, that it's a safe place where we can have these discussions. We can start talking about these hard topics, just try to do it in an age appropriate manner. So if you give them the tools, then you'll be set when you get older, because it's already part of your family's culture, integrating these things. Excuse me 1 second.
And I totally agree. And I think like the books, and like you said, age appropriate level information, and just making it like a natural thing that you talk about almost every day. I mean, on the flip side of that, my perspective, it was different. Like, yeah, I knew I was adopted, but it was certainly something that we didn't talk about. And so if you can do that and integrate that in your life, and it'll provide your child with the language and the tools to be able to talk about it from an earlier age, I think will be very helpful.
All right, I'm back.
Right. Multitasking.
Being a mom in a pandemic,
I hear you. Okay, so thank you for your question. Appreciate that. If anybody else has questions live, feel free to pop them in there. We'll do our best to get them answered. And even if you're watching this on replay and you have a question, you can still pop it in there, and we'll be sure to get back to you. So we sort of like interweave this, talking about this all the way through. And so every person's journey is unique. Every family is unique. But do you feel there's a collective truth that adoptees or even youth with foster care experience feel or felt that their voice was not heard or feel silenced? if there are adoptees watching this or youth from that have child welfare experience, what would you say to them specifically? And we know that parents and caregivers are watching, so what can they do to be allies and support the voices of adoptees?
That is an excellent question. I do agree that adoptees and former foster youth tend to be the voices that are more silenced in the adoption community. And I feel like that's because I go at length in the book about the toxic positivity that we've had historically, where we need to view adoption as the happily ever after, the end. And we don't talk about like what happens once that child is adopted, the grief that they go through, the grief that adoptive parents may go through if they're dealing with fertility loss and that type of situation. And adoption is a heavy topic, and we all have different perspectives. And historically, I've seen, and I put it at length again in the book, that the experiences of adoptees and former foster youth, when we share that publicly, when we write essays, when we go on podcasts, even if we just post on social media to our own community, there's often a backlash by friends, by family, where we're told, oh, you should be grateful to mom and dad. They did so much for you. Oh, you're not telling the whole story. Oh, X, Y, and Z. You're wrong because this. And the thing is just like when it comes to adoption, our feelings are valid, even if they are very angry or they're very sad or they're happy. And all adoptees should be able to share that without the fear of backlash from our communities for saying like, oh, well, you know what? Your opinion doesn't matter because you're not grateful. And to adoptees and former foster youth who want to share their stories and want to share it publicly, I encourage you to find a support network of other adoptees and other foster youth, because oftentimes we all know how it feels like to be criticized just for sharing our truths. And your voices matter. And even though we may get backlash now and then, it doesn't mean our voices aren't important. And for those of you who don't know, adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. And I strongly believe there is a reason for that, and a reason why we need to talk about adoption at large versus just the one angle.
He's making And just to echo what you're saying, I mean, I think, and I do find it interesting sometimes that sometimes the backlash that adoptees hear often or sometimes can actually be from the people that are closest to them, because it doesn't necessarily fit with their adoption narrative or what they believe adoption should look like and feel like. But there's a lot of support out there, and there's a lot of organizations and, like you said, other support groups that do listen and validate those feelings. So they are out there. You just sometimes have to do the work to find them.
Yes, and I make sure to include a bunch of resources in the back of my book. My podcast, Adoptee Thoughts, I interview adoptees on it. So there's a range of domestic, international, all sorts, so we can get that different perspective. Yeah,
so I will, that's great that that's in the book. So again, if you're just tuning in, what white parents should know about transracial adoption, I'll be posting the link on how to get your hands on the book. So stay tuned for that. Somebody just asked if your book was on Audible, and then someone else answered, yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Buddy, it's not working. Hang on, you can watch it on my phone.
Lego Luigi is finally
Cuteness.
It's Squirrel Stampede, and this is Dan. Oh my, there is so much to build for Lego this month. I've got 3 great sets today. I've got Luigi's starter course, I've got a tower and a mystery pack to open. We've got a lot to do, so here we go.
He's obsessed with Legos right now. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old, so.
That's pretty good prime Lego age. My guys are, well, my youngest is 10. So he's just getting out of it, but he was like
Yeah.
obsessed for many, many years. It's a good thing. So you talked about this a little bit about identity, specifically identity in a transracial adoption situation, about, the work doesn't stop after your initial home study and this and that. So what other advice would you share with white parents who have adopted transracially on how to promote that healthy connection and to identity and culture?
So I tell adoptive parents that it needs to be a consistent effort. So if you're going to I don't know, let's see, an event, a parade for Latino communities, or a Black Lives Matter situation every year or so. I feel like that is not enough. When it comes to incorporating culture, it should be almost a daily thing where it's just natural. So we're meal planning for the week. You should incorporate food from your child's culture. If you have a Colombian adoptee like me, like incorporating those empanadas, learning recipes as a family, listen to the type of music, and make sure we're making efforts. So it's not just like like I said before, like a little checklist that you're doing. These things should be part of your daily lives, because when you adopt a child of color into a white family, or vice versa, you are now a multiracial family, and you have to prioritize your child's culture because it's an integral part of their identity, and identity is really linked to self-esteem. So if you aren't doing these things from a young age and continuing them as that child grows up and they have questions, and a lot of adoptees that I've talked to experience like a disconnect where all of a sudden we're too much of our adoptive parents' culture and then not enough of our birth family's culture. And then when we're trying to learn about our birth family's culture, we feel guilty that we're not, we're pulled into all these different directions. So it's important to support them from day one, so they know it's okay to ask questions. They know it's okay to say, hey mom, I want to go to this event, or like, hey, we did X, Y, and Z, I really like that, what else can we do? I really like that martial arts class, I really like that language class. And for example, sometimes adoptive parents will say like, oh, I adopted a child from Guatemala or from Africa, I'm going to put them in these language classes. But that's not where we should stop. If you're putting a child in language classes, you need to start taking these language classes. You need to be incorporated into this community where that child is now going to be supported, and they're going to retain that language because it's part of their day-to-day lives. Because if you only do A, we're missing all these B, C, D, E parts that are supporting that in a long-lasting identity thing, because identity isn't just one and done. It's a long journey, which is deeply personal for everybody.
100%. I remember having a conversation with another adoptee about identity and transracial adoption. And she's like, it just has to be represented in your home, in your family, in your just regular day-to-day life, day. It's your life now. Like, so that representation visible to your child. Yeah, great points. Thank you. So what's next? Okay, I know you just wrote a book, but we want more. So any plans for a follow-up or workshops, or I know you have a podcast already. What else is in the works? I know you have other stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, nothing official yet, but I can tell you guys that I'm working on a workbook to be kind of a companion piece to go along with What White Parents. So we really can get into the nitty gritty. We can have adoptive parents and adoptive family really kind of see their progress and see where they need to work on next. And then I'm also working on a memoir. I recently signed with an agent to represent my memoir. And so we will be going on sub soon for that. So hopefully I will keep you updated once everything is official down the line.
Please do. We're very excited. So congratulations. I know it's not official, but yes, as soon as
Thank you.
No, I think that's very exciting. So like I said, I'm going to put links in the chat, but if you want to let people know how to if people want to reach out, they want to get in touch with you, they want to buy a copy of the book. I just see somebody already just purchased a copy. So let's share with how people can do that.
Thank you all for the support. Yeah, you can find me at Adoptee Thoughts on Instagram, or just go to my website, adopteethoughts.com. All my links are on there, interviews that I've had with other places. I was just on Tamron Hall. So if you guys are interested in seeing my relationship with my adoptive mom, we are very close, and she actually wrote the foreword to this book. So if you guys don't know, if you haven't read it yet, my mom, she has been an integral piece of this work, and I was so excited to share that with her. And I know that just hearing from another adopted parent can be really helpful to those in the adoption community, so we can learn from one another.
That's pretty special. I mean, I know this is not one of our questions. Like, can you go into like, or if you're comfortable talking about what that was like with the relationship with your mom and writing the book? And did you have those moments of like, should I be doing this? Is this going to make her feel such and such, like navigating?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
we don't have 2 hours to talk about it, but.
But yeah. When I first came up with the idea, I knew it was going to be hard. And just sharing pieces of my adoption story, I get very vulnerable and very honest about what I experienced. And so I had to reach some points where I was like, oh no, should I share this? This is going to upset my parents. But my dad, he died about halfway through when I was writing the book. So he knew about it, and he sat me and my mom down, and he told her, Paula, Melissa needs to do this. It's going to help her, and we need to support her. And then from that day on, my mom, even though like some of the stuff, it was hard for her to hear, she sat down. She's read the book like 2-3 times already. And she's my biggest supporter on this journey. And some people may say like, how can you share this? How can you do that? You're putting your adopted parents on blast or what have you. And my whole experience is that I'm not trying to attack my adopted parents. I'm sharing my story as an adoptee. And the experiences that I had were really difficult. And I experienced racism in my own family. And these are conversations that we needed to address, because not only am I a transracial adoptee, but I went on to marry a Colombian man. I have 2 Colombian sons. So for me, I needed to help our family get past this and learn about racism, learn about microaggressions, and learn about incorporating culture, not just for me, but for my kids. Because adoption doesn't just stop at me. My kids now are learning about their birth family, their birth cousins in Colombia, and they have cousins in the States from my siblings that were adopted into a different family. And so by creating this piece, this work, it was just the beginning where my mom and I could finally understand one another. And we reached this very beautiful point where we support one another, and we're now able to discuss things in a way that we never were before. And I am so happy whenever I get emails from other adoptive parents and adoptees saying like, I sent my mom your book, and like now we're talking about this. And I'm like, this is why I did this. This is the whole reason why, because I wanted to help adoptees like me, and I wanted to help future adoptees so they didn't have to struggle like I did.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. I want to thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you speaking so truthfully. I know that is going to be heard like loud and clear by our audience. And I feel what you're saying, like even just, that one, I know there's probably hundreds of other people that aren't taking the time to write that, but that one person represents so much more, right? So
yeah.
Congratulations again. I think it's an amazing thing you did. And personally too, to just have that connection, that deeper connection with your mom. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about your dad. Sorry for your loss, but I'm sure his words really carried some weight there. So
yeah. And I talk about our relationship in there, and that was my mom's favorite part. So
awesome. So we're going to wrap up soon because we're running out of time as always. We always run out of time on our show. But before we go, I want to just give you last moment to share any thoughts or anything else, like for like, this is it, like this is the audience, adoptive parents, caregivers, anything that you want to share before we say goodbye.
Yeah, it's another thing that I cover in the book, but I tell the adoptive parents and even adoptive professionals that we should all be getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Because when it comes to adoption, there's a lot of topics that are sensitive and things that we may think we know all about such and such, but we don't. We're all learning and we all need to grow together. And with growth, that means stepping out of your comfort zone, whether it's incorporating more culture into your family's lives, going to a place where now you're the outlier. You're the only white person in a room of Latinos and other people speaking a different language. And you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable so you can learn from these experiences and grow. And so you can teach your adopted children to grow as well.
I love that. That's a beautiful point. I also realized in the last few years that those moments where you feel kind of like uncomfortable, like those are the moments. Like you need to really like feel it and dig in and figure out what's going on there and really learn from that. So I like that you brought that up. I think that's amazing.
Thank you. And then like I had the unique experience of growing up in a white family and being raised in their culture. So like I had firsthand experience of seeing what that was like and seeing how that affected my viewpoints on the world. And there were things that I needed to learn, that I needed to address within myself, because no one just wakes up knowing how to be anti-racist. You know, we all need to learn. We need to read, to go out into the world, to listen to the news and have all these voices of different perspectives so we can be a better person. And there's no trick to it. You're not just gonna wake up one day and be perfect at it. You're gonna make mistakes, and that's fine. Just, you know, get up, keep going, be willing to admit to those mistakes and learn how to grow from them.
Very well said. Very well said. I think we tell our kids that all the time, right?
Yes.
Part of learning is making mistakes. So I think we all have to get comfortable making mistakes and talking about our mistakes and learning from them. So I'm going to say thank you to Melissa. I mean, can you come back? Not even about the book. Let's just chat. I know you have other works in the project, so I will be inviting you back when we hear officially what's happening next in your writing career. So congratulations.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you.
It was a pleasure meeting you and talking to you today. Before we sign off, I just want to say next week, there's not going to be a snack and chat. We're on pause, but we're coming back March 22nd with Francis Moore, and we're going to talk about the importance of supporting Indigenous children. So if you're raising an Indigenous child, supporting their connection to land, language, and culture. So you definitely want to tune in for that. And for that, I'm going to say bye for now. Take care of yourselves. Yeah, thanks for watching.
Thank you, guys.